Okay, it's 1:05. We'll get started and then see if anybody else trickles in. But my name is Ben. I'm with ARP. I want to welcome you all to the webinar, the Prevention Research Network on Physical Health, ARP. Appreciate you joining us today. Because of the number of participants, your audio will be muted throughout the call, but you can still submit questions at any point during the presentation via the Q&A feature, or there's also a chat box on the webinar console. This entire webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on the ARP website, so if you would like to watch it after. There will also be a short evaluation survey at the close of the webinar. So we invite you to provide feedback on this webinar and also provide suggestions for future webinars. That really helps us. So please do that if you can. So in the interest of time, let's get started. I first want to acknowledge the Health Resources and Service Administration as the funding source for ARP. But I'm really pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have Mika Pepper. She's the Manager of Business Operations at ABC Medicine, and then Gary Stobbe, who is the head of the Department of Neurology at UW, University of Washington. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. And Mika, whenever you're ready, you can share the slides.
Okay, can you see it?
Yep, looks good.
Here we go.
And then just as a disclaimer, this project is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, under the Autism Intervention Research Network on Physical Health grant. This information, content, and or conclusions are those of the authors and should not be construed as the official position or policy of, nor should any endorsements be inferred by HRSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. And with that being said, take it away, Mika.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, AIRP, for having us here today. As Ben mentioned, my name is Mika Pepper. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Business Operations Manager at the Seattle Children's Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center. And then Gary, do you want to introduce yourself quickly, and then I'll keep kind of giving a heads up of what we are, who we are, and what we do?
Sure, thanks, Mika. Looks like it's picking up the one without my video on, so I apologize, folks. I'm Gary Stobbe. I'm an adult neurologist by training, clinical professor at University of Washington, Departments of Neurology and Psychiatry, and I direct our adult autism clinic and help out when I can with Mika over at the Alyssa Burnett Center, and happy to be here. I'm actually our local CRE PI for the ARP network here at University of Washington. Thanks.
Thank you. So our program, just to give those of you who are in attendance a little bit of an understanding of who we are and what we do. So we're part of Seattle Children's Hospital, but we work with adults 18 and older through the lifespan with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our program looks sort of like a community college in a way. We offer over 100 different classes a week that rotate on a quarter system. We currently have over 260 active participants and many more that are have been enrolled through the years in our program. So we just had a big milestone. We completed 10 years of our work anniversary from when we opened our center with our humble beginnings and where we are today. So again, our programming delivers a lot of different classes, usually around 8 people in a class, sometimes 12, and sometimes small groups or one-on-ones in a bunch of different modalities. We have art and music and recreation and health and wellness and life skills classes. And we also have a really big component of taking adults out into the community as well. Some of the pillars of what we do, in addition to the services we offer for the adults, is an important training program. So training the next generation. So we think it's really valuable and important that we work with universities and colleges, as well as people, maybe in transition programs who are looking to potentially become the next in the field. So we have a really robust training program that we do. We match with undergraduate students and graduate students, community volunteers to really help train that next generation. And then another component of our program that we're going to share a bit about today is our research program. We're very proud of it. I come from more of a research background, so I love data. I think that data tells a story. And if you hear me say that once, you'll probably hear me say it many times, because I believe that data tells a story. And if we can use it, we can really look to see, look to understand the information it's telling us about our programming, as well as forming research studies. And then one thing we're proud of in our program is that we do serve all regardless of ability to pay, and we have a scholarship fund. So we'll talk a little bit about our current services, and this will help sort of as we move into some of the data that we've gotten from some of the demographic information that we collect, and then moving into some of the current studies. And that's sort of how I'm going to outline this conversation, tell you who we are, what we do, then talk about sort of how we have integrated one of our main data collection into our everyday today. And that's really going to be some of the data that's informing our programming, and hopefully help move the needle forward on getting more services and resources for adults with autism and other IDB. And then I'm going to move into how that has transitioned into some of the research that we've done partnering with AIRP and some of the junior investigators and collaborators in this. So again, at this current point, we run on a quarter system. In the next slide, I'll show you just a quick little view of what our calendar looks like. We have over 107 classes a week, like I mentioned. Within last calendar year, we were able to offer over 40,000 unique individual service hours. That's a pretty remarkable feat for us. And we're able to surpass our goals. We have, in addition to the classes that we offer that are a bit more recreational in focus, we do offer, music classes run by music therapists and art classes run by art therapists. We do specialized habilitation and specialized goal and attainment. We have 2 board certified behavior analysts on our team that help with different behavior support or working on contracts with our community members. We have an LBGT support group for our population. And then one component that's really important to us is to make sure that our self-advocates have their voices, their perspectives involved in every step of what we do. So we have a student advisory board, we have a family advisory board, and we're developing new opportunities for volunteerism with our students and participants in our program. So there's a lot that we do. This is just kind of a brief overview to get everyone acquainted with who we are, what we do, and the services that we offer for this population. So here is our calendar. It's busy. It's a little, it's busy. This is a lot. This is coming up on our summer calendar, what it will look like. You can tell there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The different color borders around a class indicate sort of the instructional level or supports that will be provided in a class. So a blue class is intended for learners with highest support needs. Then yellow will be instructed for more moderate support needs, then moving into kind of a red, which is less support needs. So what that looks like in a class is you can deliver instruction that might be more one step or maybe more hand over hand, and then you can break it down to have it really be able to be accessible for the different learning styles. We take adults out into the community. As you can see, those yellow spots in the end of the days are each community classes where we do plein air painting or bowling or Olympics or baseball or rock climbing or something that's unique and also a really valuable way to have more integration in our communities. So it's busy, but this is a snapshot of what we do in a week. There's a lot of people coming through, and our team is made up of incredibly compassionate, innovative, creative people. So it's a pretty fun place to work. So I'm going to dive into the data. So this is interesting data that I'm going to start to kind of go slide by slide, and it's going to start out with some of the demographic data that we've been able to pull. So sort of to highlight where we're at in our data collection, I started about 4 years ago, and coming from a research background, I think it's really important to start to collect accurate data so we can learn about what's happening in our programming, who we're serving, and be able to identify if we're moving the needle forward on meeting our goals. So as you can see, our demographic data, we're really around, the mean age is about 27-ish, but the majority of our participants really fall between the 20 to 30 age range. And we really see it start to come out from the other kind of wings of that. So this kind of gives you an idea of who are actually accessing our services. We're 18 through the lifespan, but we recognize that 18 kind of up till 21 is maybe that transition age. So maybe we see them a little bit more during the summer when it's not in their school. And then some questions that we ask ourselves is what's happening after this, peak comes down into the 30s and 40s and 50s. And maybe we will start to ask ourselves, what more can we do? Or why are people within a certain age group less likely to access services from us? So this is some of the programmatic stuff that we look at from our end. So when we move down and we look at demographic data based on diagnosis and gender, some of the analysis we've been doing is to break down looking at, autism versus non-autism, considering that we serve everybody with a developmental disability or intellectual disability with or without autism. It's important to note that diagnoses are self-reported. We are part of the hospital, but we do not require that as part of our intake process. So that's important. Ooh, I have a visual that just happened on my computer. I'm not quite sure what happened, but that was pretty cool. So when you look at these graphs, you can tell that we are, yes, ASD dominant. So more people take services with us who have a diagnosis of autism than who don't have a diagnosis of autism. And it also leans very heavily male. You can see the breakdown a little bit further on our diagnoses in the bar graph. Again, it's still showing that ASD and ASD with other diagnoses are above and beyond greater than our other diagnostic participants with other diagnoses. So again, this is important for us to look at who we're serving and who we're not serving, and maybe what we can do to be more inclusive. Okay. Oops. So this is one that shows our race. We know that this is a factor that we really want to move further forward. This data is just looking at our recent intakes since August. One thing that was interesting that I will just tell you versus showing you in comparison graphs is that we are noticing with the accumulative race of all of the people that we're serving, we are having a greater increase in more diversity in our newer intakes coming in than we have in our overall accumulative pool. So that's exciting for us. We've been hoping to push the needle forward and be more, really be able to represent and serve more across a wide variety of populations and needs. So it's nice to see that when we look at the data that we are seeing a bigger difference here. But this really gives you a picture of sort of what our demographic currently is. Our physical location of our center is located in an area called Bothell, which is generally more white and middle class, I would say. So as we continue to think about what communities are underserved, that's really important for us as we continue to do outreach. Okay, so snapshot of some of our data and who we are and who we serve. This is very important again because we need to see a lot of this information and also understand how it connects with different research studies that we might be doing. So several years ago, I should back this up, our original intake process included some questions that were highlighting quality of life. About 4 years ago, I'd say 3.5, we decided let's do a big revamp of our intake system. Let's make it much more equitable. Let's tear it down and build it up from an equity lens. Let's make it accessible for families. Let's make it accessible for self-advocates. And let's also start to collect information from baseline of the quality of life of the people that we serve so that we can know our services and potentially services like ours that offer recreational and lifelong learning, improving the quality of life of people with intellectual developmental disabilities, including autism. So this was one of the first research components that we started. We built it in as a quality improvement, because this is something that we collect when somebody starts with our program as their baseline. And then annually, we are collecting quality of life information every year, trying to understand, is there a longitudinal difference over time as people continue to take services, our types of services. So, and I'll talk about that in the next couple slides, but I really want to take a step back and say, what is interesting and important about the research that we do at ABC, and maybe what we think other sites who work with people with IDD, in particular self-advocates who are excited about being researched, might want to consider that's been successful for us. So the first and most important thing for us is that it is imperative that we have our self-advocates, their collaboration through the entire research process. And that includes from research design and conceptualizing through to implementation and into publication. We have several self-advocate staff who are involved, and we also do sometimes a broader reach to see who might be excited in helping understand some of the research methods and how it might impact our population and our programming. So that is first and foremost. Another component of our research program is we want to make sure that the research that's coming to the Alyssa Burnett Center is it focuses on really impacting the lives of the people in a positive way, creating a safe, supportive culture and space for our participants, that it focuses and really has a DEI lens in what we do. And then another component was our kind of development of a cognitively appropriate assent process. So we want research to be accessible. We have really been able to observe how exciting a lot of this community has been to be able to access research, to be able to be participating. And we wanted a way that it would be easier to understand and to digest as we go through a consenting and assenting process. So in collaboration with our team and with the IRB, we were able to come up with what we're calling a cognitively appropriate assent. It looks sort of like a social story in a way, although not a social story, where you have pictures and more, simple word about what's happening throughout the assenting process to really provide informed assent. And we've been able to use it on multiple research studies so far, which has been really exciting for us. So we're going to dive into the quality of life study. So this is our study that we take at baseline, which is when somebody first comes and starts their intake paperwork with us. And then we collect it every year again in January to understand the change over time in quality of life. So I want to make it known that we have recently sent all of our data to be analyzed, and it's still in the analysis phase. So the data that I'm presenting is preliminary from what we've been able to pull, but is still within our data analysis for greater in-depth look at different trends and different factors that we're excited to dive more into. So a little bit of context for how this specific research got started. Again, we had it integrated into our intake, but we really wanted to better define what a baseline would look like, knowing that most of our participants were still with us from a long time. And we wanted to know what would baseline actually be like for people who'd been consistently in our programming. So in 2021, coming out of COVID, as we were about to reopen our doors, right, we were a fully in-person model, and then we flipped to fully virtual during COVID. And then as we opened our doors back up again, we thought this is an appropriate time. Let's measure new baseline for existing participants. And then anyone who starts an intake will take a brand new baseline. So we might be able to have some really interesting comparative measures there as well. Also looking at what was the quality of life for people, this community coming out of COVID, and how might that be different years on after we've come out of the pandemic. So we really wanted to look at, again, quality of life for our programming, or excuse me, for participants in our programming. We are excited to see and maybe help drive forward some of this conversation about more and greater supports and resources that are would be really helpful for adults with IDD. Those who work in this field know that once you age out at 21, it's a cliff, and there's very few services that are available and few opportunities, which can lead to decrease in life satisfaction, increase in mental health, increase in crises. So, and then another aim that we had is to really dive deeper into different variables that we also might want to understand could have an impact on quality of life, including employment, hospitalizations, diagnoses, or demographics, or maybe even information that's really targeted towards our specific services, like how many services they're taking per week, what services they're taking, and how many hours a week are they getting these services, to really help us maybe get a better framework of what that can look like. And I want to say thank you to the Yvonne Betson Trust for helping to fund this research. And that photo is from one of our cooking classes. So here's some of the data, and we were able to submit this data in a poster publication in INSAR. So when we were able to look at some of the life satisfaction, it was very interesting to see that it was statistically significant that those with a non-autism diagnosis had a higher life satisfaction overall than those with autism diagnosis. And then when we looked at that as a variable with employment, we also saw some really interesting data. So we're interested in knowing, in addition to services received in our program, what else is important for all adults, and we're focusing on the adults that we serve in our program. We know that opportunities outside of our program are also important: employment, volunteering, connection to the community. So this is an important variable and factor that we want to dive into. So we had three sort of questions that we looked at. Are you employed? Yes. Are you employed? No. Or no, but actively looking for employment. So we were able to see that among adults with no employment intention, so no, I'm not employed, and no, I am not actively seeking employment, those with an autism diagnosis had a lower satisfaction of life compared to the non-autism diagnostic group. We also saw that among the adults with an intention of employment or were employed, there was comparable levels of satisfaction between these two different groups. Gary, is there anything you'd like to share on this one? Follow up with?
Yeah, I think I'd add also looking at the comparison within the autism versus non-autism group. So it's interesting that in the autism group, those with employment intention had higher quality of life rating than the autism group without employment intention. But that was reversed in the non-autism group. So in the non-autism group, folks that had no employment intention were the happiest group of all of quality of life. So I don't get that quite. It's interesting. It'd be interesting to think about theories behind that. So this is very preliminary data. There's so few of our participants that are actually employed at a, that answered on the employment rate. We've got to collect more data, see if this continues to hold up. The graph on the right did not meet statistical significance, whereas the graph on the left did meet statistical significance.
Yeah. And I'm going to show one more graph on the next slide as well. So again, this is just taking a look at this same data, but with more variables, looking at age and gender. We still have our employment intention there, looking at autism as a variable, and really being able to kind of dive a little bit deeper using linear regression to understand if autism, what is the intersection between employment intention? So no, I don't have employment, but I'm looking, or yes, I do have employment, and autism in predicting life satisfaction. So just another interesting slide graph to look at. I think as we continue to dive deeper into this data analysis now, especially looking at greater variables and more questions that are asked from the quality of life survey that we use, we might be able to get some more interesting data from this. And as a reference, the quality of life survey that we use is the World Health Organization's quality of life survey, which is accessible for anyone. It's in multiple languages, and there's different modules that you can use. So there's, for example, there's an intellectual and developmental disabilities module, which is what we have used. There are shortened modules. There's an autism. There's like a 10 question autism one. So if anybody is interested in quality of life information, that is the form in the survey that we have been using for this study. Okay. So that's a snapshot of our quality of life data. We're really excited about what we're going to learn. We're really hoping to push the needle forward, maybe in, who knows, in policies, so we can get more funding and more resource for this community. So now we're going to dive into the selfie study. Thank you to the AARP for funding this research. So the principal investigator of this research is Dr. Anthony Osuna. And it is in a collaboration with our center, and we're really excited about this project. It's sort of been a multi-phase project. So it's called the Safety, Education, and Learning for the Internet, or what we call SELFIE. Dr. Osuna did this research and created it down in UCLA, but used a population of autistic self-advocates who are a little bit different potentially from the population that we tend to support at the Alyssa Burnett Center. So we said, well, this intervention looks great, but can we look at how it would be created to best suit the needs of this specific community, which might be really different from the community that it was originally piloted on. So the first phase of this study was to do basically a big needs assessment to look at sort of what are the internet uses and social media uses and concerns and fears and needs of this community by acquiring data from both self-advocates and caregivers as well. So, so as you know, you can see there's the title of it, there's the study objectives, which is to understand internet use among adults with IDD and identify areas of needed support to inform forthcoming redesign of the SELFIE program. So taking the original SELFIE program and then redesigning it with involvement with our self-advocates and with caregivers in order to best create a new structure of it for this community. So we have completed the first phase of this, and we are starting to get ready for the next phase of the SELFIE study. And I'll go to the next slide. Oops, give me a quick second. So the first phase, we had 23 participants. 16 of them self-reported, and then 20 were caregiver. Of that, 52% of the participants have an autism diagnosis, and 74% are male. So this is one of the studies that we did create that developmentally appropriate assent process. It was very well received by the population and caregivers and everybody who was involved, which was awesome. We hope actually to be able to potentially look and see the strategies that we used and be able to share some of those results, but future study, future time. We again had protocols and self-advocate, autistic self-advocate involvement from the very beginning of this project as it related to the Alyssa Burnett Center. We used surveys and accommodations. And, you know, we did notice some challenges within interviews, and I think it's important to take a look at that as we look at what can we do better for the next time that we do this research. What were the challenges that maybe we faced or this community faced, and how can we improve that for the next phase? So when you look at the interviews among the participants, you can really see, it's pretty interesting to see what folks are tending to use the internet mostly for: music, gaming, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So yeah, just an interesting snapshot. It's important to get a needs assessment before we develop an intervention, because maybe we're not hitting the mark if we just dive in without knowing what the community needs first. So then this is some of the qualitative information from the interviews. This was also on a poster presentation at INSAR, and I have the reference for this at the end of the presentation. So as you can see, different themes came about when conducting these interviews with caregivers and the self-advocates. You know, what do they use the internet for? Like keeping in touch with friends or shopping, transportation, different safety needs, entertainment, information, ease of access using, you know, it to connect with people. You know, we talked about what are some of the challenges that this community might have with the internet, or social media. Physical safety is a big concern, meeting people online or having maybe the wrong type of people be interested or connecting with a vulnerable adult. Financial safety, are there scams and identity theft that happen or could happen? Cyber stalking, trusting in others, or, people maybe taking advantage of somebody, harassment, inappropriate websites. And then talked about different strategies that people use for keeping safe, and then different recommendations that they might have for interventions. Dr. Stobbe, anything you'd like to add to the selfie study?
I'm excited to see this kind of continue to move forward. I think that this is a high need, so excited to be participating in this. I've thought about this as it relates to other types of literacy. We think about like healthcare literacy, about communicating with your provider, and how to help guide self-advocate adults in that process. Thinking about criminal justice literacy, how to talk to police officers on the street. There's lots of topics I think that this could kind of branch into. So definitely excited to see this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what are our goals with this? Why are we doing this? And I think it's really so that what we want to do is to create a tailored intervention in internet and social media safety and use that people in our program can take and have better understanding and skill set for how to navigate these programs with the goals of their ultimate safety. Okay. And we're going to move into our last study that we have had going on. We're calling this the dance intervention. Again, thank you very much to the AARP for funding this study. The principal investigator is Dr. Raima Amin and Dr. Stobbe as well. And this is a really fun study. We copied it based off of a study that was done, I believe at UCLA, which was looking at dance intervention in children with autism. And we thought, well, this is great, but we already have a lot of different dance classes that we do who are put on by people who have had large histories in dance and experience working with this community, dance therapy. So what if we look at our developed intervention and do a randomized basically trial looking at the dance intervention compared with general recreational classes. So this was a very fun study to do. We really got right on into kind of that intervention part of, getting people into the study, splitting them up into 2 different groups, following a 10-week intervention, and now we're doing a lot of the data analysis. So this wrapped up in March 2024, so recently. So again, what are our objectives of this study? So we wanted to determine if dance intervention is accessible and feasible for adults with autism and intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we wanted to look and see if it can help lead to improvements in social quality of life. And a big component with this was also looking at some of the physical measurements as well. So we had a total of 11 participate in the intervention group, which is the dance group, and 9 in our control group, which was an open recreation class. We had a few more, but there were some people that dropped out. And it took place for 10 weeks. Each class was 1 hour long. So they would come in, they would do an hour of either dancing or open rec, and then we did pre and post assessments as well. So I'm just going to show some of the preliminary data. We just are starting to get this analyzed, so I don't have too much to show. And the data that I do show is important to note that while it's a great graph, I don't have data to know if it's statistically significant or not. So I want to make sure that that's known yet. We have not yet been able to crunch those numbers. So this is some of our preliminary just snapshot when we look at life and health satisfaction. Again, this study also used the quality of life from the WHO, which is great for us because it's important, again, that we can use similar measures to really see if there's comparisons across studies and groups and interventions and things like that. So you can see that the dance group had overall a greater health and life satisfaction than the recreational group, and also was able to move slightly further ahead, but whether or not it's significant will need to be determined. And I believe I've got one more slide that I will show that has another graph on it from this study. And so this one is looking at some of the self-esteem scores from one of the self-esteem measurements that we did. So again, a disclaimer that we do not have this analyzed for statistical significance, but it does give you a preliminary snapshot. Again, it looks pretty interesting just when you look at it, that the dance intervention group had higher at baseline and also higher at post-intervention than the recreational group. So when we start to analyze this in further, it will be interesting to kind of come up with some conclusions for why we think this might be. Dr. Stobbe, do you have anything you'd like to add to the dance?
Yeah, I'll just add, we do not expect these differences to be statistically significant just because the N is so small. And really the purpose of this study was feasibility was the primary purpose. This is the first time that the dance intervention that the folks at UCLA have been piloting, first time that it's been piloted in an adult population. And I'd say probably the most important thing is that we were able to pull this off, and all the hard work at the Alyssa Burnett Center and their team and all the instructors, a very low dropout rate, very few people dropped out. And this is an overall theme, I think, that I want everyone to walk away from this program and these opportunities that we have partnered with our self-advocates and the participants at the Alyssa Burnett Center on how enthusiastic they have been about participating in research. And this has been across the board now about how it's been received and welcomed, and then the dedication to participation in these trials. And I think, you know, this needs to fly in the face of what we've been seeing as a trend over these past several decades that was highlighted by Matt Siegel at his talk at INSAR last week about the decline in the inclusion of people with IDD and autism co-occurring, that we've seen a decline in folks that have co-occurring IDD. And we'd like to see that change, because I don't think that if we continue in that direction, it's really hard for me as a medical provider that works with so many people with IDD to look at the research in autism and to apply it across the spectrum of people that we serve and work with. So it's one of the themes at the Alyssa Burnett Center. One of our participants once quoted, "We can do hard things." And I request that of our researchers too. We can include this population in our research.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Stobbe. I think a word that I really lean on heavily is agency. Being able to provide agency to the adults that we work with so that they can make an informed decision if they wanted to be a part of research, and then providing an equitable and accessible way for them to participate that was specific to their needs. So that's why the development of the cognitively appropriate assent process was really important, because we wanted everyone to be able to be included in this if they wanted to be, and not to have an exclusionary criteria based on somebody's cognitive abilities, because then it's one more reason why we're not able to get data on this community and have any idea about things that we're looking at and our goals of improving quality of life. Okay, so we're just coming to the last few slides here, and then we're excited to hear your questions. So what's the future look like for the Alyssa Burnett Center's research? Great question. We have a lot of things that we want to go into. We do an amazing job of delivering classes and group classes. It's a really fun community space. It's a space where these adults are making connections and friendships. We've had so many amazing testimonials from families saying, before joining, my child didn't have friends, their mental health was declining. And since they've been involved, not only do they have friends and they're learning something new, they even have a girlfriend now. And it's just these little tiny comments and things that, okay, we're doing the right thing, and we're getting our services to people who really need them and want them. So some of the programs that we're hoping to be able to build, my sort of pet project is a vocational skills program. I'm really excited about person-centered planning, and I would love for the Alyssa Burnett Center to be able to bring person-centered planning into what we do as a service, helping to create more job opportunities and vocational skills and opportunities. So coming soon, but again, this is where research I think fits in. We need to know, is the program that we develop working? Is it, and is something like person-centered planning, if we can collect more data on this, maybe we can get more information out to, DDA and other types of funders to be able to increase access by getting person-centered planning or similar programming and services on more waivers, for example, right? So this is one way that data collection can help us tell a story, and then we can help share that story with the different stakeholders. Health and wellness program. We do a lot of fitness classes, we do cooking classes, but can we really develop this into a more robust health and wellness program for our participants? Clinical services. Again, right at this point, we're connected with the hospital. We're part of Seattle Children's, but we don't have clinical services. So this is something we really would like to move the needle forward as well. Can we provide behavioral supports? Can we provide mental health services? Eventually, can we move into occupational therapy and, build in physical therapy, speech and language? So things that we're not doing right now, but we hope to push the needle forward and even think, for example, ABA is a really challenging thing to be able to do for adults because it's very hard to be able to bill for it. So can we maybe think differently about how this is being done and be able to track it through the research and try something new? So we don't have anything creative, but these are opportunities and ideas that we could have in the future for new research directions. And then, of course, expanding the cultural reach of our program and really increasing the ethnic and racial diversity of our participants. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you to the Alyssa Burnett Center. Thank you to our amazing participants and our self-advocates, to our research partners and collaborators. I have a list of a lot of the folks who've been involved in our research from the very beginning and continue to be. Thank you to the AIRP network for having us and for supporting this research. Without you all, many of these projects would never have been able to come to fruition. So we really appreciate it. And if you ever want to reach out to us, here is Dr. Stobie and my contact information and the references for the posters that were presented in INSAR. With that, I will go ahead and close my PowerPoint and
Mika, while you're doing that, I'll add just a thanks to you and your leadership. This would be nowhere without all the work and leadership that you've done. Also shout out to our founding family, Charlie and Barbara Burnett and their daughter Alyssa. A program like this would not have gotten off the ground without their generosity and vision. And also shout out to Seattle Children's Hospital. They took a risk on a program that they'd never run before. And it's been successful, and they've been supportive throughout. And so really a testament to both philanthropic efforts and a place like Seattle Children's that wants to do good. So thank you.
all right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. That was really insightful. I'm sure everyone agrees. We have a little bit of time left, so if anyone in the chat has a question, this is a great opportunity to get some insight from Mika and Gary. So any questions? Type them in the chat.
Yeah, I'd be curious. People cannot chat, right, Ben? They can just.
Yeah, so there's a Q&A function. You can submit questions through there.
Okay.
You could also use the typical Zoom chat to add questions or comments.
Yeah. Well, if folks are putting in, any questions, just while I saw the comment that Don Lewis made in the chat about, I think that Don made that comment when I was talking about the comparison of the autism versus non-autism population, that seeing that kind of difference, and one of the things that we're going to be looking at with our data is over time, kind of folks participating longer over time, and do what group views this approach, this kind of school type approach, and what do they view that as kind of home, as something that's very satisfying for them. We get a lot of anecdotal comments from adults who really feel like this has become kind of their place, where they really thrive and get so much out of it, both socially and with continued lifelong learning. I would say anecdotally also that I don't think that this model is the best for the extreme ends of the autism spectrum. If we think about folks that are more bound towards competitive employment, we haven't been able to serve that group as well. And folks that have the most profound forms with their non-speaking intellectual disability and maybe behavioral disruptive challenging behaviors. We've struggled with them sometimes. Although I think we do better than probably every other program out there, we still struggle at both those ends, and we want to continue to try to make gains to serve as many as we can.
I see there's 2 questions. Should I just jump in and answer them? Is that the best?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Dawn asks, what is the cost for non-scholarship participants? So the cost for the majority of our services are paid for by, I should say, about 80% of our clients are DDA eligible. So the Developmental Disability Administration through some of the waivers. And so the great majority of our community uses DDA respite to pay for services. But if they do not receive that benefit, then for our regular respite classes, the charge is $35 per hour. For respite classes, specialized services would be different because this follows a different contract under DDA for the specialized habilitation contract. Happy to answer more questions on that. And then Michelle asks if we can share the cognitively appropriate assent. Yes, I believe we can. I don't see a reason why we couldn't. We hope more people would be able to learn from it and potentially be able to implement it. Would be excited to collaborate if there's people who are excited to try it out, and maybe we look for different or certain ways to measure the usefulness of it. Would be excited to hear collaborations on that. Happy to send it if I'm not quite sure the best way to send that, but we can get back to you on how to get that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say reach out to Mika afterwards, and you guys can connect. Just to add a comment on the cost, it is worth stating that as much as Mika and her team work to try to be financially feasible without philanthropy, we're not there. There's reasons why programs like this aren't on every street corner, and there's reasons why it has been successful with Seattle Children's, because they do such a good job with us in helping support through philanthropy. But we believe very strongly in wanting to serve individuals regardless of their ability to pay. And, so that was a choice we made. We do recognize that we've been in existence for 10 years and we serve a very large number of folks, but our wait list is starting to grow. And, how do we replicate this model, and how do we move into other communities and to do this in a manner that is sustainable? So we're thinking about that a lot, and always happy to speak to others if they're thinking about programs like this and how we might look at it and help you launch it. I'm notorious for thinking about scenes from movies and comparisons, and I think about the engineers on the movie Apollo 13 when they were trying to get the astronauts back, and they dumped a bunch of stuff on a table and said, "Here, get them back with this equipment." And that's kind of what we were faced when we launched this program. We didn't have a lot of models to base it off of, but we had certain things available to us, and just super thankful that this has been as successful as it is. I'll shout out to Ben Moore and John Wenberg Ben and John, who are self-advocates who are cited on the research studies. Ben and John both started as participants and students at the Alyssa Burnett Center. They moved on to do LEND training fellowships at University of Washington, and have now been hired as class assistants and instructors at the Alyssa Burnett Center. So a beautiful story to put along with the quantitative data.
Yeah. In fact, they're teaching a class on self-advocacy, disability self-advocacy and awareness. So really full circle. It's pretty wonderful. Our contact information is in the chat. Feel free to reach out, email, more than happy to share resources. Again, I believe very strongly in the power of collaboration to push our needle forward. So more than happy to set up times to speak with people and meet and share more knowledge. All we're trying to do is get good services into the lives of more people who want them. So that's our ultimate goal.
Like Nicole doesn't see the information in the chat. There was a question. Do you mind just posting it one more time? We could just
It's yes.
just so everybody gets it.
To you and the panelists.
Yeah, or you could send to everyone just to make sure.
That was my bad. Thank you.
No,
Nicole.
you're no worries.
Here we go, everybody. Okay. Thank you. We were so heavily Zoom world for many years, and now we're used Teams mostly. So I forget the little tricks to Zoom. There you go.
Amazing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, any more? Sorry, don't want to step on your toes, but we have a couple of minutes if there's any more questions.
Yeah.
I'll add maybe if we've got a couple more minutes, Ben, just adding, I think one of the other ingredients of success for this program was the luck of being 5 minutes from our University of Washington Bothell campus, where we've had, I mean, Nika, what's the number of volunteers that we've had now come through Burnett Center?
We have hundreds of volunteers. I'd say we currently have 40 active volunteers at the moment. Yeah. And over half of our staff started in some sort of volunteer role, whether as a student or community volunteer, and loved it so much they didn't want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, we have great numbers with regards to just the volunteers. The number of folks that have volunteered at the Alyssa Burnett Center, where that has resulted in them changing the direction of their education and their post-secondary education. The number of individuals that we've hired through that pipeline of doing the volunteer work, and the great friendships that have grown between folks, participants, folks with IDD and our volunteers, and those friends continue. So it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you all again for attending the webinar. Thank you, Gary and Mika, for presenting. Just to let you know, this webinar has been recorded. It'll be archived on the ARP website if you want to reference it again. I'm going to post the link to the recording, and I'm also going to post, give me 1 sec. Here's the link to the recording. And then if you're able, I would love if you could take a few minutes to complete the post-webinar survey. Just give your feedback. It's really short. I think it's under 5 minutes or less. We want to be able to do webinars that, are in line with the areas you're interested in. So I'm going to post the survey right here. Please fill that out if you can. But other than that, thank you for attending. Thank you, Gary and Mika. And we'll see you hopefully in June for the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.